There's just one brand new Nintendo Switch story we need to talk about today, but it is an exciting one because it has to do with Nintendo Switch Online and an update to the N64 games roadmap situation, as well as some interesting speculation that is taking place online suggesting that we may be getting multiple game drops this week, and we have to break down all the details and discuss why that might not actually be the case right now. What's up, Nation? If this is your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below. Hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. Now, as I mentioned, guys, today we are talking about Nintendo Switch Online and the update that just appeared officially from Nintendo late last night, confirming that yes, indeed, we will be getting a brand new N64 game added to the service later this week. Now, one thing you can actually comment on with how Nintendo has been doing these game releases is that they are at this point sporadic, other than we know to expect one new N64 game per month, and we even got to a point where the existing roadmap of announced games have completely run out, but Nintendo has since stuck to their pattern of just releasing one per calendar month, and sometimes we see these updates a full 2, 3, even 4 weeks out for when the next game is going to come to the service. And in more recent times, it seems like that time window has been closing down to just a few days in some cases, as you can see the following posted up over on Nintendo of America's Twitter, where it says maximum power, take to the waves in Wave Race 64, coming to Nintendo Switch for Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack members on August 19th. So first off, Wave Race 64 being the next game on the list is like a fantastic announcement, and it's just a ton of fun. On the surface, this game is just plain out fun. If you want to have fun in your life, and most people do, boot up Wave Race 64 and do some fun tricks, go through and ride the waves, do the courses, do the races, do time attack, everything that the game has to offer. Enjoy the soundtrack and the look and the vibe. I am ready to play Wave Race 64 yet again. And now you can't argue that this is more of a expected title on a lot of fronts, on ones that we could see added into the N64 library of games, because of course it was added into the Wii U Virtual Console in the past. And one major issue, if you've been around on the channel for a while, where you've seen maybe some of my Wii U videos, is the fact that all of the Wii U N64 Virtual Console games, for whatever reason, Nintendo thought it was a good idea to add a dark screen filter to those titles, and you really couldn't enjoy them in full quality. The colors did not pop. Now there is a reason behind that, because apparently instead of toning down some of the flashes that can cause epilepsy and things like that for people who are susceptible to that, Nintendo in that era just decided, let's just throw a dark filter over the screen so we won't have to worry about it. And it really does take you out of the experience if you have nostalgia for a lot of the N64 titles. So hands down, definitively, with all of the emulation things that we've seen fixed over the course of time with Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack, because I was very vocal about the problems that this service once saw once upon a time with games like Ocarina of Time not rendering fog, even Mario Kart 64 having fog missing. Really just across the board, there were issues that were noticeable enough that could take you out of the experience. Input delay being a big problem, random game crashes that in some cases can cause your save file to be completely deleted. And while you can argue that Nintendo hasn't completely addressed everything, and we definitely need still some fine tuning, like button remapping available right in the emulator app itself instead of having to rely on the system level button mapping, especially until Nintendo addresses and ramps up production for the N64 controller to meet demand. But regardless of all of that, the service has come such a long way in the almost a year that expansion pack has been on the shelves now, because it was late October when that originally became the new pricing tier and the new option. And before we know it, we're going to be in October again in 2022. So fortunately, Nintendo did not look the other way with the service and then just choose not to update any of the issues, but rather with each new N64 game and edition that came out, there were oftentimes updates to the emulator itself, and it now is a much better playable experience overall than it was when it first launched. Now, one interesting thing, because now we have a couple months of specific data points around where Nintendo's going to go with future announcements on N64 games, because previously, as I mentioned, there was an announced roadmap of games, and I think many people, myself included, figured that the logical explanation would be at something like an E3 Nintendo Direct, we would get an updated roadmap of N64 titles, because the games that were announced actually ran out in June if you assumed that Nintendo would stick to the one N64 game per month, which they did. So it seemed logical that we would have just a small timeline section of that E3 or summertime Direct presentation be focusing on things like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass Wave 2, as well as the updated here's the next 6 to 8 or even 10 N64 games you can expect to be added into the service. However, it is now clear that with the addition of the unannounced Pokemon Puzzle League last month and then this month getting Wave Race 64, that I think you can safely assume that Nintendo from here will leave the N64 games going forward unannounced, and we can tentatively expect really just one brand new title per month to be added to the service. And you can say that, well, that's ultimately what they did with the other services as well, as NES, SNES, and even Genesis. We don't have any clear commitment on how frequently Nintendo will add in those games or what games will be added. We have zero heads up. It is just, here is your new batch of games, sometimes multiple at a time, especially with the Genesis being between 3, 4, or even 5 added into the service in a single update. And so in terms of setting your expectations for some kind of part 2 roadmap where we see games like Banjo-Tooie and Donkey Kong 64, Diddy Kong Racing, Super Smash Bros, and Mario Party 1 through 3, like all that kind of stuff that we can maybe expect to be added into the service later on, I wouldn't be expecting any kind of trailer to give us a heads up for the farther roadmap of the service, but rather just expect Nintendo to stick to this 1 per month announcement of new games. Now, at a September Direct, could they do a updated roadmap? They definitely could if they want to double down and continue to sell expansion pack based off N64 games, as opposed to potentially coming out with a new family of systems, which is what I'm hoping we see, something like the Game Boy Advance being the big expansion pack edition, and then we get something like Game Boy and Game Boy Color as part of NSO base tier. I think that would be a great move, but clearly we don't know if Nintendo will actually go that route or not, and if they want to make sure that subscribers re-up to the service and don't let their subscriptions expire. I think we have to have some kind of commitment from Nintendo that, hey, here are these fantastic titles, you'll want to stay subscribed to receive them. So we could definitely see them do a part 2 roadmap at something like a September Direct, but for the time being, I'm going to expect these one-off surprise trailer drop announcements once per month for new N64 titles. Now, to address the speculation that's going on online around whether or not we may actually be seeing a ton of new games hit the service supposedly this week, maybe even alongside of the new N64 game like Genesis and like NES, it's because there's been maintenance spotted with both of these applications. However, we have to dive just a little bit deeper into this particular story, because while spotting maintenance for these applications historically has been a huge pullback of the curtain, and we pretty much could figure out when Nintendo is going to drop new games onto the service either a day or 2, maybe even a week in advance, that is actually not the case anymore as of recently. Because if you guys remember on the channel, I have mentioned how the last few game updates that have come to N64 as well as Genesis and even the NES and SNES games have actually not had maintenance tied to them, meaning that I believe that Nintendo essentially realized that people were spotting that maintenance and equating it with, yes, we are getting new games this week, and so these last few updates haven't had any kind of maintenance spotted to give us any kind of heads up. And while there was actually maintenance that took place first on the NES application earlier this week, and then just most recently the Genesis maintenance was scheduled and completed, both of these maintenances are done, doesn't mean the games have to go live then. It could mean that the games would also go live on Friday. But I want to point out a tweet from the Nintendo Status Bot account itself, which is the one that tracks all of this stuff, where in response to fans questioning whether or not the NES application going under maintenance meant that we could get new titles, they had the following to say: Nintendo is once again performing a large amount of maintenance for what seems to be a server software update. This maintenance is part of a group of 20 other titles undergoing maintenance. It is unlikely that this maintenance will result in an update to this title. So if you do a little bit of scrolling on that account, you can see that it's not just NES and Sega Genesis, it's even Advance Wars Reboot Camp 1+2. That could be tied to something, maybe that game's going to be coming out soon or something, but it also is very likely we're seeing games that never get maintenance scheduled just randomly on a list of 20, 30 different games that are all scheduled for maintenance at the same time. Nintendo is doing something bigger behind the scenes, like they mentioned, most likely a server software update of some sort. So I wouldn't be surprised to see the SNES app added in soon for maintenance and things like that. And I honestly do think that Nintendo may have caught on to the maintenance scheduled for these NSO apps and figured out a way to avoid that, because as I mentioned, we haven't seen maintenance scheduled for these things for the last few game drops. So just to temper my expectations and not expect any kind of major blowout thing, I think that all of the maintenance being spotted online is indeed some kind of server software update, and it affects ultimately a broad number of titles. That's the reason that you're seeing things like Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu just randomly on the list for server update maintenance. Like, it's not new content getting added into all these games, it's just some behind the scenes bug fixes that Nintendo needs to do for the longevity of the service, or who knows what it actually is fixing. But all of that said, it doesn't mean we can't expect Sega Genesis titles to come around the corner this month, because we may get another update for those. We may get another batch of NES and SNES, but I do think that with future roadmaps of NSO games that we've probably gotten to that point where we actually just have to wait for Nintendo to officially confirm them, especially if you look at the last few batch of updates. So I'm going to temper my expectations personally for just Wave Race 64 to hit this week, and if anything else comes this month in terms of new NSO games, it will all be icing on the cake. But I want to hear from you guys at this point in the video, all your personal thoughts and opinions on everything we talked about today. How are you feeling with Nintendo Switch Online Plus expansion pack right now, the existing roadmap of games, and what you kind of know to expect going forward with that one unannounced new N64 title per month? Are you happy with that cadence, and you think that we'll get some great games that we still need to see Nintendo add into the service, like Smash Bros? Maybe one day we're lucky with GoldenEye, Donkey Kong 64, Banjo-Tooie, and all the classics. Are you happy with if we continue to get those type of games added in to continue to pay and be a subscriber to the service? Or are you somebody that, as we approach that 1 year mark of the service being available, that you'd consider just letting your subscription expire next year if Nintendo doesn't do anything drastic, like a new family of systems announced at something like the September Direct? And definitely share with me whether or not you're hyped that Wave Race 64 is the next N64 game, and what games do you hope we see announced for future months like September and October. So regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch yesterday's video next if you haven't already, where we boot up 5 of what I consider to be some of the best free-to-play Nintendo Switch eShop games, and I share my recommendations on who these games might be for. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.